Welcome to our deep dive into the power of now. We're going to be looking at some excerpts from Eckhart Tolle's work, really zeroing in on the core ideas and, more importantly, how you can actually apply them in your everyday life. So you're ready to tap into some present moment magic.
You know what I find so intriguing about Tolle is that he really blends these profound philosophical concepts with surprisingly practical tools. Like, he doesn't just leave you with abstract ideas, but he gives you some really tangible ways to shift your entire experience of reality.
Yeah, that's what really hooked me when I first picked up The Power of Now. It wasn't just another self-help book promising vague solutions. It was like Tolle goes right to the heart of it and saying this present moment is all that truly exists. It's kind of like a challenge almost, like, okay, prove it. But the more I read, the more it resonated with me.
It is a radical notion, isn't it? To think that the past is just a memory and the future is just our imagination running wild.
It is. Yeah. Because we spend so much time dwelling on, past regrets or anxieties about the future. We're constantly missing out on what's right in front of us.
Yeah, it's like we're living life on autopilot, completely missing the scenery.
Totally.
And so Tolle uses this analogy of the past and future being like illusions, almost like mirages in the desert. He says that only NW is the real oasis.
I love that analogy. It really brings it home.
Yeah.
That we're often chasing after things that aren't even real and neglecting the only moment we truly have. But it's not easy to just snap your fingers and become present moment masters, right?
No, not at all.
Our minds are so busy, constantly churning out thoughts, to-do lists, anxieties.
Absolutely. And Tolle would argue that that overthinking is actually at the root of a lot of our suffering. It's that mental chatter, or the monkey mind, as it's sometimes called, that keeps us from experiencing real inner peace.
Okay, so how do we quiet that monkey mind? What's the antidote to that? Because I think we can all relate to that feeling of being caught in this whirlwind of thoughts.
Yeah, it's something that we all experience. And the thing is with Tolle, he's not saying that we should try to stop thinking altogether. That's practically impossible.
Right.
It's more about learning to observe our thoughts without getting swept away by them.
Okay.
It's about creating some space between ourselves and that mental whirlwind.
That makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Is there a technique or a practice that can help us create that space? Because I think for a lot of us, the idea of simply observing our thoughts sounds great in theory, but much harder to put into practice.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where mindfulness comes in. And the excerpt that we have here uses this really cool image to illustrate this. He says to imagine your thoughts as clouds passing through the sky. You don't need to engage with each cloud, analyze it, judge it, or try to control it. You can simply watch them drift by.
I like that. That's a powerful visualization.
Yeah.
It makes it feel less daunting somehow.
Yeah.
But I still have this part of me that wonders, if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I?
And that's a question that goes to the heart of Tolle's philosophy. He suggests that we've created this false sense of self, what he calls the ego, that's constructed from our thoughts and emotions. We get so identified with those thoughts and feelings that we believe they are us. But he says there's a deeper awareness, a true self, that exists beyond all of that fluctuation.
So we're not our thoughts. That's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah.
It almost feels like a puzzle. If I'm not that voice in my head, then who or what is observing those thoughts?
Exactly. And that's the journey that Tolle invites us on. It's not about achieving some distant state of enlightenment. It's about cultivating presence in our everyday lives. And that's actually what we'll be looking at next, the practical steps that we can take to become more present, more aware, more connected to that true self beyond the thoughts.
When we left off, we were talking about this deeper awareness, this true self that Tolle says exists beyond our thoughts. That's a powerful idea, but it also feels a bit abstract. How do we connect with that in the midst of our busy, messy lives?
It's a great question, and one that I think so many of us grapple with. And, Tolle doesn't suggest that we need to retreat to a mountaintop or abandon our responsibilities. It's really about engaging with life fully, but without all the mental baggage that we usually carry around.
So it's not about detaching from the world, but changing how we relate to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that he explores is this concept of accepting what is. He argues that a lot of our suffering actually stems from resisting the present moment, from wishing things were different than they are.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I notice that for myself. Like when I'm stuck in traffic, my immediate reaction is frustration, impatience. But if I can just catch myself and say, okay, I'm in traffic, this is the reality right now, it somehow makes it less agonizing.
You're demonstrating the principle perfectly. It's not about passive resignation to unpleasant situations. It's about choosing not to expend energy fighting against what already is.
Always key.
And that acceptance can actually free up so much mental and emotional space.
Well, so it's about choosing our battles,
Right.
not letting every little inconvenience or frustration hijack our inner peace.
Exactly. Yeah.
The excerpt we're looking at here dives into how to apply this in everyday scenarios. Like if you're feeling anxious, Tolle suggests acknowledging the feeling, like I am experiencing anxiety right now, and just observing it without judgment, without getting carried away by it.
Yeah, you're creating a little bit of distance between yourself and the emotion. You're not identifying with it, I am anxious, but you're simply acknowledging its presence without letting it define your whole experience.
It's like we become the watcher of our thoughts and feelings,
Yeah.
rather than getting completely swept up in them. That feels empowering.
It is empowering, and
Yeah.
there's a growing body of research that actually supports this idea, that this kind of mindful observation can actually decrease the intensity of difficult emotions. It's not about suppressing or denying your feelings, it's about finding that balanced awareness.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces connect. It's about being present, accepting what is, detaching from the ego, and cultivating a deeper sense of self-awareness. It sounds like a whole new way of being in the world.
It is, and it's not always easy, you know? Tolle acknowledges that our minds are conditioned to think and react in certain ways. But he says that with consistent effort, you can actually retrain your mind to become more present, more mindful, more aligned with that true self.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no magic switch we can flip to suddenly become enlightened beings.
Right.
It's about showing up every day and making a conscious effort to cultivate these qualities.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin?
Well, that's where these practical techniques we touched on earlier come in. Let's maybe explore those in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
One of the simplest but most effective techniques is to use what Tolle calls triggers in your daily life as opportunities to return to the present moment.
Triggers. What do you mean by that?
It could be anything. A phone notification, a certain time of day, even something as simple as every time you walk through a doorway. Each time that trigger occurs, it becomes a reminder to pause, take a breath, and reconnect with the present moment.
Oh, I love that. So it's like creating little mindfulness checkpoints throughout the day. Instead of mindlessly reacting to every notification or rushing from one task to the next, we have these built-in reminders to pause and reconnect.
Exactly. And the more you practice this, the more it becomes a habit. You start to naturally tune into the present moment without even needing the reminders.
That's amazing. It's like we're rewiring our brains to be more present. Are there other practices that can help us along this journey?
Absolutely. Another technique that he emphasizes is this idea of shifting from a doing to a being mindset. It's about creating space in your day for simply being rather than constantly doing and achieving. This is where practices like meditation or spending time in nature can be incredibly powerful.
I can see how that would be challenging in our culture that's so focused on productivity and achievement. But there's something appealing about simply allowing ourselves to exist in the present moment without judgment or striving.
Yeah, there is a deep sense of peace that comes from that. And it's not about becoming lazy or giving up on your goals. It's about finding balance. In those moments of stillness, you often connect with your deepest self, with that source of peace and wisdom that lies within you.
It's like hitting the pause button on that constant stream of thoughts and to-dos. That would be incredibly refreshing.
It is. And as you incorporate these practices into your life, you'll begin to notice these subtle but profound shifts in your experience. You might find yourself less reactive to stress, more attuned to your intuition, and more deeply connected to the world around you.
This has been so insightful. I'm already starting to feel a shift in my own awareness just by talking about these ideas. But before we wrap up our deep dive into the power of now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how this all connects to the bigger picture, to the broader context of spirituality and personal growth.
That's a great question, and one that we'll explore in more depth in part 3 of our deep dive. We'll delve into the spiritual implications of Tolle's work and connect his insights to other wisdom traditions and practices. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of now. And, throughout this episode, we've been exploring some seriously mind-shifting concepts, but I'm really intrigued by this deeper spiritual dimension of Tolle's work that you mentioned earlier. Can we dig into that a bit more?
Absolutely. You see, the power of now, it gives us those practical techniques that we've been talking about, but it's also deeply intertwined with spiritual principles and insights that have resonated with people for centuries.
When you say spiritual, what exactly do you mean? Because I think that word can have so many different meanings for people.
That's true. I think in this context, what Tolle is talking about is this idea that true peace and fulfillment come not from, external achievements or possessions, but from connecting with our innermost selves, with who we really are beyond the ego.
So it's about looking inward rather than outward. Kind of like that saying, the kingdom of heaven is within.
You got it. Tolle uses this term being to describe this true self, this pure awareness that exists beyond our thoughts and emotions, beyond that constant chatter of the mind.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the connection to spirituality here. It's about tapping into something deeper,
Yeah.
something beyond the surface level of our everyday lives.
Exactly. And this concept of transcending the ego, of quieting the mind to connect with a deeper reality. You find this throughout various spiritual traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, even in the mystical branches of Christianity.
So Tolle's ideas, while presented in a modern context, are actually drawing upon a rich history of spiritual wisdom.
They are. It's like there's something inherent in the human experience that draws us to these ideas.
It makes you wonder
Right.
if we're hardwired for this.
Yeah. There's a universal longing to connect with something greater than ourselves, to find our place in the grand scheme of things. And that's what makes the power of now so compelling. It's not offering quick fixes, but it's inviting us on this journey of self-discovery. That leads us back to our true nature.
It's a profound journey, but I think it's easy to get lost in the philosophical concepts and lose sight of how to actually live this. How do we bring these spiritual insights into our daily lives?
And that's where the practices we were talking about earlier become even more important. Mindfulness, being present in those everyday moments, detaching from the ego's need for validation, these aren't just techniques for stress reduction, they're gateways to spiritual growth.
I see. It's like taking these ordinary activities, like savoring a cup of coffee or taking a deep breath, listening to a friend, and we're imbuing them with a deeper meaning.
Exactly. When you practice mindful breathing, for example, you're not just calming your nervous system, you're also cultivating presence, connecting with that deeper awareness within you.
And when we practice accepting what is, we're not just dealing with difficult situations, but we're surrendering to the flow of life, trusting in a wisdom that's bigger than us.
Exactly. It's about finding the sacred in the ordinary.
Yeah.
The extraordinary in the everyday spirituality isn't something separate. It's something you can access in every moment if you pay attention.
That's powerful. It's like we're waking up to the magic that's always been there, but we just haven't been fully aware of it.
Exactly. And as you awaken to that presence, you realize that you're not just this isolated individual. You're a part of something much larger, this interconnected web of being. Your actions, your thoughts, your very presence, they all have an impact.
Wow. It makes you realize that even the smallest acts of kindness, awareness, presence can ripple outwards.
They do. And that's the true power of the power of now. It's not just a book to read. It's an invitation to live differently, to be more present, more aware, more connected to yourself and the world around you.
It's a call to action, but not in the sense of striving or achieving. It's more about just being.
Yeah.
Showing up as your truest self.
Yeah. And if we can all do that, even in small ways, even for brief moments throughout the day, imagine the impact it could have, not just on our own lives, but on the world.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question that Tolle asks in his book. It's a question I hope will spark your own exploration of this power of now. He asks, what would your life look like if you could consistently tap into the power of now? Let that question sit with you. Explore it, experiment with it, see what unfolds. And until next time, happy diving.